Well, hello, everybody, and welcome again to the 5th Annual Life Sciences Workforce Conference. Every year, MassBioEd produces this conference as a means of bringing together leaders from our colleges and universities with counterparts in all facets of the life sciences industry. We come together to exchange ideas and discuss best practices for education, training, and professional development. Massachusetts leads the world when it comes to biotechnical innovation, and this is due in large part to the close collaboration between academia, industry, government leaders, and our medical institutions. So I'm really happy to be able to continue this conversation virtually this year and hope that you each learn a bit from each other and forge some connections over the next few days that you may not have had the opportunity to do otherwise. I'm going to begin with a brief recap of where we were at the end of 2019. And then focus on what the hiring and employment situation in the life sciences looks like now as we find ourselves in the middle of a global pandemic. So at the end of 2019, MassBioEd produced our annual Life Sciences Employment Outlook. Here are some of the major findings. We found that the number of students entering college is stagnating, and the recent increase in those majoring in scientific fields is still not sufficient to continue the pace of growth that the life sciences industry needs. We also found that the increase in PhD conferrals in the life sciences over the past decade had been very small, while the concurrent increase in hiring demand for people educated at this level has doubled. Immigration plays a substantial role in filling our local talent pipeline, and changes to national laws will significantly impact the life sciences industry. We'll actually do a deep dive into this issue Thursday on the third day of this conference. And also, hybrid careers play a large and increasing role in the life sciences industry right now. There's a huge demand for people to have both a high level of knowledge and expertise in different areas. For example, we need people with a deep understanding of molecular biology who can also write code to decipher the meaning behind large data sets. We need people who understand cell biology and can also design new equipment for cell culture. Over the past few years, our life sciences industry has been experiencing extraordinary growth in terms of scientific breakthroughs, technological advances, venture capital investments. But the supply of qualified people to fuel this growth has simply not kept up with the demand. And this report shows why there's no end in sight to the talent shortage without a willingness to explore new strategies to expand our workforce. The report itself is available on our website. It's massbioed.org/job trends. And if you haven't taken a look at it, I recommend that you do so. So what can we do? How can we grow and strengthen this talent pipeline? Well, these are the recommendations that we put out in the report. The first thing is to really bridge the gap between what students learn and what employers need them to know. We need to provide more awareness of the career opportunities in the life sciences to high school and college students. And we need to better prepare graduate students and postdocs for careers in industry. We can also enhance the existing talent pool through professional development and expand employees' potential by developing their soft skills. We also need to rethink the current methods that we're using for training and our standards for hiring. Now, December of 2019 may seem like a lifetime ago, but it turns out that many of the key messages are really even more relevant today. This pandemic can only be fought through science, and the need to grow and strengthen our life sciences workforce is really more critical now than it has ever been before. We've all read the headlines and heard statistics about layoffs and unemployment, and I'm certainly not going to discuss global macro trends here, except to offer contrasts and comparisons directly to the mass life sciences landscape. So hiring demand is usually measured by job postings. Using data from Burning Glass Technologies Labor Insights, I mapped hiring demand weekly over the past 12 months. So these blue bars and the left axis in blue represent the life sciences landscape exclusively. And then the green line and the right axis in green, this represents total Massachusetts hiring over the past year, all industries statewide. what we've seen statewide is a decrease in about 45% of hiring demand from the middle of February to early May. And in fact, hiring statewide was down about 17% from a year ago. If we look just at the life sciences sector, again, actually, we saw about a 45% decrease in hiring demand from the middle of February to early May, and virtually no difference from the data a year ago. However, last year, all indications were that demand would be much higher in 2020 than it was in 2019. So we would have expected there to be an increase year over year if this pandemic hadn't happened. So if you look more in depth at just the hiring demand from the end of February through the end of May, there's definitely a decrease here, but I would also suggest that the decline could be attributed to reasons other than a true decrease in the demand for talent. First and foremost was all the confusion and uncertainty that we saw at the beginning of this crisis. People were really struggling just to keep their current employees engaged and productive. So we all know all desk-based workers were sent home, transitioning to work from home indefinitely. And the essential employees who had to go into labs and had to go into manufacturing suites were completely restructuring their work lives. So I would venture to say that at this period in time, posting new job ads is really not high on anyone's priority list. And there's hopeful signs that as hiring demand seemed to tick up in May, maybe employers are getting used to this new normal. Also, back in February, we really weren't sure how long this situation was going to last. And I think as people understand this is going to be the same business as usual for a while, there's more of a comfort with continuing with virtual interviewing and remote hiring. This is just a reminder, it's the same slide as before, but if you look at weekly variation hiring over a year, there's an awful lot of noise in this data. You could pretty much pick any pair of data points and they would tell a different story from any other pair of data points. So I looked at hiring demand just for the 3-month period, February 23rd through May 23rd, for the past 5 years. And what we see here is a clear linear trend upward. There's actually a 55% increase during this 3-month period from 2016 to 2020, and a 10% increase just from this time last year. Again, I predict that hiring demand would likely have been much higher without COVID, but it's safe to say that the industry has been very, very resilient in the face of the pandemic. But hiring demand isn't the same as actual employment. So I also wanted to do a reality check on the actual employment. So looking at the Massachusetts Department of Labor data for people employed in these professions, there's fairly consistent employment in scientific professions over the past year. We see maybe a slight downturn from February and March to April of 2020. But the April 2020 employment figures are actually higher than the April 2019 employment figures. So I just want to note, this includes people employed in all professional, scientific, and technical services. It not only includes life scientists, but also architects, accountants, lawyers. It's a very, very broad category, but there just simply isn't any government data that's more finely tuned yet. That will come many months from now. If you look at unemployment as opposed to employment, again, unfortunately for many people, there's no surprises here. If you look at the newly unemployed people in Massachusetts, over 60% come from the leisure and hospitality industries. Only 8% come from this professional, scientific, and business services category where most of our life scientists are employed. 9% of the newly unemployed are in manufacturing, and pharmaceutical manufacturing is a piece of this, but again, a very small percentage of the total manufacturing in Massachusetts. Now, looking at the subsectors that comprise the hiring in the life sciences, I wanted to look for any changes that may have happened over the past year. And between spring of 2019 and spring of 2020, we did see a modest increase in hiring in the pharmaceutical manufacturing sector. So last year, again, 2019, pharmaceutical manufacturing accounted for 32% of the life sciences hiring in Massachusetts. This year, it accounted for 37%. For smaller companies exclusively involved in scientific research and development, last year they accounted for 49% of hiring. This year is down to 45%. And for hospitals, last year they accounted for 8% of life sciences hiring, and this year that was down to 5%. And I just want to note that when I say hospital hiring, these are only biotech-related positions. These are not patient care positions. It could be that the hospital difference comes from an emphasis on COVID care and at least a temporary de-emphasis on basic research. But just so you're clear, research fellows, clinical trial managers, those are included in the sample set, but surgeons and primary care nurses would not be. And who's actually hiring? Well, the top employers have remained fairly consistent over the past few years. Takeda, Vertex, Thermo Fisher, Biogen, Dana-Farber, Sanofi, Mass General, Pfizer, Alexion, and Novartis. These are always in the group of top employers here in Massachusetts. Moderna is a notable exception to that. They're, I say, a notable addition to this field. Probably all followed them in the news recently. They are in the short list of companies that are developing a vaccine to fight COVID, and they have been ramping up manufacturing capacity in the event that their vaccine is approved. Now, in the next slide, I'm just going to take a deep dive into exactly what these companies are hiring for. So again, this is data from February through May of this year. And these are the actual positions that were in top demand by these employers. This slide just shows the biopharma focused employers. But if you look across here, you can definitely see a lot of similarities between the actual titles that they're hiring for. Medical director, clinical managers, and process development are definitely just keep showing up again and again. Companies are also hiring for interns, although these intern postings were mostly from February and March, not so many in April and May. For other top employers in the life sciences, not those who are actually part of the biopharma group, Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Mass General, again, these are biotech positions only, not patient care positions that we're looking at. We still continue to see a need for people involved in clinical research coordinators, clinical research assistants, along with the need for bench scientists and computational scientists. Thermo Fisher is another big employer. Their positions tend to gravitate towards the manufacturing sector. We've also seen a lot of Thermo Fisher in the news recently as they ramp up production of COVID-related diagnostic tools. So if you look at specific positions in demand, not only this year, but over the past 5 years, again, we just see a lot of consistency. Clinical research, clinical operations, medical and regulatory affairs are always in high demand. We also have a perpetual need for scientists in all functional areas and for scientists and engineers to work in process development. There's also a perennial need for manufacturing technicians. So some takeaway messages here. Life sciences companies in Massachusetts are still hiring. The growth trend that we've seen over the past few years is proving resilient. And there continues to be the highest demand in the fields of clinical, medical, and regulatory affairs. So these data serve as kind of an objective reality check on the demand for talent in the life sciences industry overall. But we still need to contextualize this information and shed some more light on it. And for that, I'm very proud to bring to you a group of very distinguished talent acquisition and human resources leaders. Our panel will be moderated by Jeff D'Italia, who's Vice President of Stratacuity, a leader in scientific placement.